You cannot just put these containers here. This violates the covenant. I expect them removed immediately.
They are staying right where they are.
I walked outside and felt the wind hit me in the face. Hard, cold, coming from a direction it never came from before. I turned toward my back fence, and my heart stopped. My hedges were gone, not trimmed, not cut back. Completely destroyed. Just torn stumps and scattered branches everywhere, like someone took a chainsaw and ripped through years of growth in minutes. Tire tracks cut straight across my property line. The HOA down the hill had sent a crew onto my land without permission and destroyed my hedges because they blocked their premium ocean view. When I called them, they said it was a misunderstanding, then told me I should actually be grateful for the extra sunlight. Grateful for them destroying my property, so I made a few calls of my own. 3 days later, flatbed trucks pulled up at sunrise. A crane lifted massive steel shipping containers, the rusty, beat-up kind covered in ocean salt and faded warning labels, and dropped them exactly where my hedges used to be, end to end. 40 feet long, 8 feet tall, completely legal. The HOA's premium view disappeared behind a wall of rusted steel. When they demanded I take them down, I sent one message back. You wanted the hedges gone. Enjoy the containers. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories just like this. My property sits on a rise above a newer development. The kind of land that existed long before anyone ever planted an HOA sign at the entrance down the hill. I bought it for the quiet, for the wind moving through open space, for the distance from other people's rules. Years ago, I planted a line of tall, dense hedges along the back boundary. Not for decoration, for privacy. They broke the wind, softened noise, and marked the line between my land and theirs clearly, deliberately, and legally. Those hedges were mine. Always had been. The HOA below me decided they didn't like them. From their side of the hill, the hedges blocked what they called a premium scenic view. Ocean in the distance. Sunsets they advertised in glossy brochures to sell homes that didn't exist yet, when my property was already established. At first, the complaints came dressed as courtesy-friendly emails. Polite requests, asking if I'd consider trimming just a little. Then the tone changed. Official-looking letters began arriving. Bold headers. Legal-sounding language. Phrases like for the benefit of the community and impacting neighborhood property values. Underlined as if emphasis could create authority, they talked about fairness, shared enjoyment, and sightlines. Never once acknowledging that the land wasn't theirs and never had been. I responded once. Short, polite, final. My property was private. It's not part of their HOA. The hedges were staying. That answer didn't land the way they expected. I started hearing about myself through neighbors, how board members called me difficult, uncooperative, someone who refused to compromise. One even joked during a meeting that I was hoarding the view, as if sunlight and scenery were communal assets I'd stolen. Then the behavior shifted from talk to action. I began noticing people lingering near the boundary line longer than necessary, phones raised. Measuring tapes clipped to belts. Quiet conversations that stopped the moment I stepped outside. Photos taken from multiple angles, at different times of day, like documentation instead of curiosity. One afternoon, I found a small orange survey flag pressed into the dirt just inside my side of the line. No explanation, no notice, just there. That was the moment it stopped being about hedges. They weren't asking anymore. They weren't negotiating. They were preparing. I understood exactly what they were trying to test. Not the view, the boundary. The next morning I knew something was wrong before I even saw it. The wind hit me full in the chest. That never happened. I turned toward the back boundary and my stomach dropped. There had been a dense wall of hedges thick, tall and deliberate. There was nothing but torn earth and jagged stumps. Branches lay scattered across the ground like debris after a storm. Leaves crushed into the soil. Tire tracks cut straight through the boundary line. This wasn't trimming. It wasn't maintenance. It was destruction. The cuts were rough, uneven, rushed. Heavy equipment had been used. Whoever did this hadn't been careful. They'd been confident. A neighbor from down the hill came over within minutes, visibly uncomfortable. He told me what he'd seen just after sunrise. A landscaping crew with trucks and industrial cutters pulling up along the boundary. When someone asked what they were doing, the workers said they were authorized to restore the community view. They worked fast. No signage, no notices. Then they packed up and left. No warning, no permission, no easement. I contacted the HOA immediately. Their response came back an hour later, cool and rehearsed. They called it a misunderstanding, claimed the hedges violated a community sightline standard, suggested the crew must have believed they were acting within HOA authority. Then, without hesitation, they added that I should actually appreciate the result, the improved openness, the benefit to everyone. That was when the conversation ended. I stopped arguing and started documenting. I photographed every stump, every torn root, every tire mark crossing onto my land. I launched a drone and captured clear overhead footage showing the property line and the damage side by side. I pulled my original survey, the deed, and the county boundary maps. Collected statements from neighbors who had watched the crew cross the line without hesitation. Then I requested replacement estimates. The numbers came back worse than I expected. Mature hedges don't grow back. Years of natural growth can't be undone with a replanting plan. The damage wasn't cosmetic, it was permanent. When I sent the documentation and estimates to the HOA, their tone shifted again. This time it wasn't dismissive, it was threatening. They denied responsibility outright, questioned the validity of the costs, warned me against creating future obstructions that could interfere with the newly opened view as if the destruction had already been decided, and compliance was the only thing left to negotiate. That was when I understood the truth. They didn't just want the hedges gone, they wanted my silence. I could have filed a lawsuit that same week. Yet, I could have let attorneys trade letters for months, while the HOA argued semantics and pretended responsibility was a gray area. But standing there, staring at the stumps where my hedges used to be, I realized something simple. They hadn't cared about legality when they took my property, they cared about the view. So I decided to address the view, quietly, legally, permanently. I made a few calls. Within days, I located several decommissioned shipping containers, full-sized industrial steel, kind built to survive saltwater storms and decades of abuse. I pulled permits, verified zoning, checked setbacks, confirmed there were no height limits, no aesthetic restrictions, and no HOA authority over my land. Every box was checked. Then I scheduled delivery. Early one morning, flatbeds arrived just after sunrise. Engines idled, metal chains rattled, cranes swung into position, and one by one, the containers were lifted off the trucks and lowered into place end to end, precisely along the boundary where my hedges had stood. The ground shook when they touched down. By noon, the hillside was unrecognizable. From the HOA's side, the premium scenic view was gone. In its place stood a solid wall of steel towering containers streaked with rust, scarred from ocean crossings, warning labels faded and peeling. They cast long shadows, they blocked sound, they blocked sight. But it wasn't subtle, it wasn't decorative, and it was entirely legal. The reaction was immediate. My phone started vibrating before the last container was set. Emergency HOA meetings were called. Emails poured in. Panicked, angry, indignant. Words like hostile, retaliatory, and community harm were thrown around like accusations. They demanded removal. They claimed it was offensive. An eyesore. Bad for morale, I replied once. Short, calm, documented. The containers were permitted, temporary storage structures on private property. All county regulations had been followed. No HOA approval was required. And if aesthetics were now a concern, I noted politely, they were significantly easier to remove than the mature hedges they had destroyed without permission. After that, I stopped responding, because the message didn't need explaining. It was already standing there, 40 feet long, 8 feet tall, made of steel, and impossible to ignore. Authorities reviewed everything, every shipping container, every permit, every setback, fully documented, fully legal. The law confirmed my right to place them on my property. Meanwhile, the HOA panicked. Citations for trespassing, property damage claims, insurance filings. Their threats vanished when confronted with evidence. Emails turned cautious, calls went unanswered. The board realized their power was gone. They had no choice. Hedges were replaced at their expense, legal fees covered. A signed agreement ensured they would never step onto my land again. Containers stad not as retaliation, but as a silent, steel-clad declaration. These boundaries are mine. Neighbors who once demanded the perfect view now walked past, eyes averted. HOA leaders muttered quiet apologies, steering clear. Every glance upward reminded them of who actually owned the land. I regained control. Permanent fencing went up behind the containers. Slow-growing privacy trees were replanted on my schedule. Each addition reinforced what was already true. This land belongs to me, private, peaceful, untouchable. The containers weren't just functional, they were a symbol. A steel warning that property rights cannot be bullied, ignored, or manipulated by a powerful HOA. Views are optional. Property rights are absolute.